Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swagglehos. And in this video, we got ourselves an update for the comic book index for the month of August. That is right. It is the first week of September, and I got to share with you guys what I am currently seeing in the state of the comic market. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking to yourself, I wonder what Swag's funny little intro is going to be today to set up the conversation in this video. Well, viewer, I don't have one. Okay, this is going to be a fastball right down the middle. I don't like this video. You don't like this video, but we got to sit here together. We got to get through it. We got to look at lines, charts, and graphs and be boring together. I like this video, Swag. Shut up, Billy. Anyways, before I get into it, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I would appreciate it. Also, head on over to swagglehoscomics.com. Help support the channel by picking up a copy of Sanity, issue number 1. You can go to the shop. There's cover A's, just a couple of cover C's left. And if you really want to, help me out, support the channel, do one of those things, it would really appreciate it. Buy me a coffee, so I can put these lists together for you guys, month after month. And hey, you might actually like the story and have a comic book that doesn't go down in value because I control the market on that one. Unlike these other comic books we're going to talk about here today. But let us get into it. Of course, the comic book index, guys, is the top 100 sold books per age for silver, bronze, and copper. I take the highest volume of graded book, and that's the one I count. I take the final sale of the month, aka the market close, and I get all of my numbers from GPA data. So suffice to say, if I was going to buy the top 100 most in-demand books for each age, how much would it cost me on a month-by-month basis? Well, last month for the Silver Age, if you were looking to buy all those comic books in July of 2023, we were at the $46,969 mark. Not quite the calendar low for the year, but we were certainly flirting with it, and it looked like, the Silver Age had been oscillating up and down, up and down, up and down. So what did we see in this coming month here in August? Well, it looks like we went sideways, now at $47,296, and I would say a sideways movement is actually okay. Although what we are seeing with some of the other graphs that I'm going to show you guys in about a second is that it does feel like, again, the macro pressures are starting to push the value of comic books down. And with those pressures, it's going to be, lower lows and lower highs seemingly for the rest of the year until we can turn things around. But I'm going to save my talking points and my bear and bull case for the end of the video like I usually do. So let's jump ahead now to the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age last month was at the $40,435 range, much like the Silver Age was not the yearly low, but was definitely flirting with the yearly low. So where do we go here in the month of August? Well, surprisingly, we actually did find ourselves at the new yearly low at $37,621. And just look at that graph, ladies and gentlemen. Ever since the month of, April of 2021, I mean, we've had a few up months, but man, we have been on the slide. All these last couple years, based on how I calculate these graphs, we are basically around that of where we were in December of 2020. You can see the December number in 2020 was 37,724, which is actually slightly higher than what we have here today. And like I've said, many times on this channel, is that I believe personally that all of these keys are going to have retracement back to that 2020 price, right above that 2020 price. And we're kind of seeing it now finally manifest in the aggregate. But again, I will save the bigger talking points for later on in the video. Here in the Copper Age, we were at $27,091. So where do we go here in the month of August? And much like the Bronze Age, it looks like we had a bigger drop this particular month than we've seen in some of the last couple months, now sliding down to the $24,200 range. And similarly to that of bronze, we are now at a point that is actually lower than what we were seeing in December of 2020, where this particular index value was actually at the $25,000 range. And one of the things with copper that I always have to point out is that, it really did shoot up a lot more drastic in that of late 2020, as opposed to, what we saw in the Silver and Bronze Age. And also, reliable returns for Copper Age books hasn't been the same in terms of what I've seen. So it's sort of hard to say where the, actual trend line should be with this index. Perhaps the index has been inflated as early as mid 2020. But here you see the graphs side by side by side. Again, I personally think that, based on how I calculate the data, based on how I look at all this stuff, I typically feel that the Bronze Age chart is maybe the most accurate when it comes to the overall state of the comic book market. The mean average, I know a lot of people always talk about how not all books are going down. I mean, there's golden age books that are setting new records. It's like, okay, yes, golden age, of course, because it has a lower census, but we have to talk about, in the aggregate. I mean, you can't just say like, oh, look at Action Comics #1. That has always gone up in value. We have to talk about it in, the macro. And like I've been saying in previous videos, it does feel like comic book values follow that of macroeconomic policies. And again, don't fight the Fed. Interest rates are still high. Interest rates could still be going up. And it's not going to be until, we start to cut interest rates and we start to get into more, free money territory that the comic book values are going to turn around. And again, I'm somebody who believes in comic books, and I do believe that those values will turn around. But for now, we're going to feel that downward pressure in the market. But before I really get into those talking points and give you guys sort of the outlook for the rest of the year and the bear and bull case, let me just kind of quickly go over some of the nuanced, detailed numbers, because I know some of you guys actually really do like this stuff. But in July of 2023 for the Silver Age, we were at 46,969. Here in August, 47,296. I would call that a push, although it went up ever so slightly. I mean, there's always a margin for error, whenever I do this index. For the Bronze Age in July of 2023, we were at 40,435. In August, 37,621, a decrease of 7%. And then the Copper Age now here in August, we're at 24,200. Excuse me, I forgot to switch July over to August, but that is a decrease of actually 10%. Now let's go into the key takeaways. Silver book values, 18% were down this month and only 9% were up. So twice as many books actually going down. But I have a little bit of a clarification on that based on, how I've been doing the index. What I've been constantly seeing is that, books will put up fights, they'll refuse to correct down to that slightly above 2020 price. Maybe it's a book that in 2020 was $100 and then, went up all the way to $200. So it, doubled. And then, month after month, it's at 190, 195, 180, 185, 170, 190, and it refuses to reset back down to where it should be, which in my opinion, it should be more at that 110, 120 level. And then finally, it capitulates down to that 120 price point, which keeps the index overall afloat above that of the 2020 price, but you can have, 18% down this month rather than 9% up. 27% non-sale, which means, people not looking to buy those keys that usually are in demand. So anytime you have, higher percent of down and a higher non-sale factor, that means that it's going to be a lower month for that of the comic book index. Bronze values were similar, 23% down, which is a lot more than you would usually see in a given month, 16% up, which is actually pretty respectable for the month, and 12% non-sale, which is, pretty average when we're talking about, the non-sale factor for the Bronze Age. Here we have the month by month. Now this is specifically related to the Silver Age, and you can see the cyan line in the middle is the 2023 calendar. August, typically speaking, has been a down month for the last couple years based on what is going on, with this comic book boom. I would suspect that that is going to be the outlook for the rest of our calendar year, where we will see a lower value range in September and October, and then maybe November and December, we can start to sort of turn the corner, or at least trade sideways, at least until we know that we're going to get a pause by the Fed. Maybe we can get interest rate cuts, although I don't suspect that's going to happen in Q4 of this year. But let's move on now to the trend line. I like to show you guys this just for the heck of it. Again, it is not drawn to scale, but you do see that the Silver Age is generally, right smack dab in the middle of where it basically should be for that of, its comic book value. Now, the Bronze Age has been, kind of flirting a little bit lower than that of the trend line, but again, it is not actually drawn to scale. But I do want to show you guys this. Remember, I had pulled up this chart, which is, the journey of the investor and how similar this chart is to what we've seen with this comic book boom, where, if I go back and forth, you can see how much they mirror each other from, the new paradigm to the denial to the bull trap to the return to the normal, and then all the way into the fear and capitulation. And now it really does feel like, we're probably, right around that despair phase. I mean, maybe we're going to live in the despair phase for the next few months or so. And you can see from this chart right here, or the trend line, that the Bronze Age has actually fallen below that trend line value. So, maybe it is entering that despair moment. And again, the despair phase is probably the time when you want to look to buy. I mean, again, don't buy a book if you feel like it's being priced still at its 2021 high. But generally speaking, if you can find a book that, has gone for less than what it was selling for, in, the prior years before the comic book boom, then maybe that is going to be a good opportunity. And there's a lot of books out there that, I generally see while I'm doing my chart, my index, that really have fallen below those trend lines. I mean, Werewolf by Night, 32, She-Hulk, #1, Eternals #1. Now, not to say that Eternals #1 has a bright future, but there are a lot of books for that reason that could be good buys if you find them at good deals, which leads us now to the bear and bull case. Figure that I should wrap up the video just giving you guys my general thoughts on the state of the market. Now, again, time and time again, I've talked about how macroeconomic policy seems to have the biggest correlation to that of comic book values. I see it all the time on my Instagram. People are always posting, a new low sale for the year and going like, what happened, guys? What happened? And to me, it's not all that surprising. I mean, I look at this index and I think to myself, okay, there is going to be a point where all books retrace back to that 2020 price. And every time I do my index, some of them put up fights, throughout the months. Marvel Spotlight 5, it refuses to go down, refuses to crack. And then finally I get a month like this and it's like, oh, there we go. It finally hit the price. It was only a matter of time. Fantastic Four 49 refuses to go down. And then finally it does. And I feel like all books are going to have that capitulation into that price above the 2020. Now, again, like I said in some of the nuance of what I was talking about, it doesn't mean that, just because the books are going down doesn't mean that they're falling below that of their 2020 price. It just means that, they're finally getting back into line to the general trend. So you can have a month where it's like, 30% of the book values have gone down, yet the index itself is still above that of what it was going for in 2020. That's based on how the model is calculated. But again, I create this index, to show us what the aggregate trend line is going to be so that you can make those individual purchases or those individual judgments on whether or not you want to pick up a book. I mean, it's been my personal feeling and my personal approach that when I see Silver Age keys and Bronze Age keys or Copper Age key, and I see it at a good deal, if that good deal is not close to what it was selling for in November and December of 2020, then I don't frankly feel that it is a very good deal. If somebody says to me, well, this is selling very close to, the 90-day average. Well, if the 90-day average has been still elevated, around that 2020 price, to me, I'm like, oh, that's a red flag. I think that at a certain point, that 90-day average will eventually capitulate and fall back down. And eventually they all do, as I've been seeing, individually in the nuances of all of the comic books that I've been entering in my spreadsheet. And I would assume that for the rest of the year, it is very, very possible for us to feel those macro pressures. I mean, current situation with the Fed is that, they're talking about possibly raising interest rates another 2 times, bringing it up to 6%. I mean, nobody knows, right? Nobody knows. The market is predicting and all this stuff. There's going to be another Fed meeting in September. It all has to do with whatever the data they get from inflation is. But Jerome Powell has made it known that, he's willing to raise rates again if they need to. And their target goal has been to get to 2% inflation. And they're not going to do that unless they can actually suck all the money out of the market. And so far, the inflation, while it has been going down, is getting a little bit stickier. Somebody did the analogy in one of the finance channels that I was watching where they say, losing those first 20 pounds if you're severely overweight is not too hard. It's losing that last 5 to 10 pounds once you actually are around, your target weight that, makes it really, really difficult. And that's going to be kind of where we are if we actually want to get inflation down to 2%. Now, there might be an interesting point that we hit where maybe some of the comic book values actually start to outperform that of whatever is going on in the macro economy. I mean, you have to think to yourself, maybe there is some, inflation hedge or countermeasures that go on in some of the collectible market. Obviously, it's a lot slower to sell. It's not like crypto. It's not like stocks. You can't liquidate in the same way. So it will be interesting to see that. I do actually start to notice that in a lot of the auctions, weekly auctions and stuff like that, we're finally starting to see less, mega keys go up for sale. So maybe the demand side will continue to increase as the supply side starts to dwindle. A lot of people, pulling those books off the shelves, not really willing to sell right now. So, maybe we're going to see less desirable keys, and that'll keep the demand high to essentially keep the floor up for a lot of bigger keys and bigger books. But that is all I got for this video. That was the update for the month of August. Let me know what you guys think. Again, This is just information. It's not a perfect system, okay? You guys don't have to listen to what I have to say. I mean, every single time I do these videos or I talk about this stuff, I always get people in the comments. They're always like, well, I've never been doing better in comic books, and you say that it's all going down. I bought some comic books and I sold them for $1 million. It's like, look, I'm not talking about you, man. I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying in the general state, when we're looking at values, a lot of these books eventually retrace back to those prices. And again, to preface, I am somebody who is very, very bullish on the future of comic books. I have a YouTube channel talking about comic books. I love this stuff. So I'm not trying to be, Bear Gold Haas over here. I'm not trying to be negative Nancy. I'm just trying to say that, now is looking like a pretty good time to find some of these deals. And if we do enter the despair phase for the rest of the year, I'd be swooping up a lot of those keys. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. What do you guys think? Are you Team Moon Boys? Are you Team Bear Bros? Like, comment, subscribe. See you on the next one.